evil or criminal, it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. See a following as the state citation provided. Proof beyond reasonable doubt in all its context always denotes proof of every reasonable hypothesis except that which it tends to support, and it is proof wholly consistent with the guilt of the accused and inconsistent with any other rational conclusion. Thus, for evidence to warrant conviction, it must exclude beyond all reasonable doubt every other hypothesis than that of the defendant's guilt, and the defendant is entitled to acquittal if his guilt of the crime charge is not the only reasonable interpretation on which the facts adduced against him are suggestible. And if the stated facts are compatible with either innocence or guilt, the court must acquit, since evidence which tends to prove either of the two propositions has succeeded on proving neither. It must carry a high degree of probability. It does not mean prove beyond all shadow of doubt. However, in all cases, there must be proof beyond all reasonable doubt, and nothing short of that will suffice. It is based on the above and from the two count charges against the defendant that are formulated a sole issue for determination as follows. Whether from the evidence adduced on record the prosecution has beyond reasonable doubt proved the offense of culpable homicide against the defendants to warrant their conviction and sentence as per the counts charged. It is an established principle of law that there are various ways of proving the guilt of an accused person standing trial. It can be by 1, confidential statement of an accused person; 2, evidence of eyewitness of the crime; and C, circumstantial evidence. See the case of Samino versus the state citation as provided. As stated above, under our criminal justice system, an accused person is presumed innocent until the prosecution proves his guilt. Hence, an accused person is not expected to prove his innocence because before the law court, it is clearly the duty of the prosecution to establish the charge against the accused person beyond reasonable doubt. The defendant stands charged with the offense of conspiracy and culpable homicide. The prosecution relied on circumstantial evidence in proof of his case. During the hearing of this case, the prosecution tendered 10 exhibits and called for witnesses. Culpable homicide is defined under Section 220 of the Penal Code as, I quote, whoever caused death, A, by doing an act with the intention of causing death or such bodily injury as is likely to cause death, or B, by doing an act with the knowledge that he is likely by such acts to cause death, or C, by doing a rash or negligent act commits the offense of culpable homicide, unquote. This is further buttressed by Section 221 of the Penal Code, under which the defendants are charged, which provides that, I quote, except in the circumstances mentioned in Section 222, culpable homicide shall be punished with death. A, if the act by which the death is caused is done with the intention of causing death. Or B, if the doer of the act knew or had reason to know that death would be the probable and not only a likely consequence of the act or of any bodily injury which the act was intended to cause, unquote. Flowing from the above, the ingredients of the offense of culpable homicide are: 1, that the death of a human being had actually taken place; B, that the death was caused by the accused person; C, that the act that caused the death of the accused of the disease was done by the accused with intention of causing death, or that the accused knew that death would be probable consequence of his act, unquote. From the facts of this case as presented before this honorable court by the prosecution, it is on record that on the 7th day of September 2019, at about 1900 hours at the compound of Zaki Uba of Ohinati village in the Mologogom area of Nasarawa State, the trial of Mama Ashide Pev, 80 years old, Friday Pev, 26 years old, and Gabriel Aka, 23 years old, were shot and killed. This is reflected in the evidence before this court, which is not in dispute. What is left for the prosecution to establish whether the death of the disease was caused by the act of the 4 defendants. The prosecution, in a bid to prove that the defendants did conspire, shot and killed the disease, stated in evidence, claimed the murder of Zaki Uba's family members, Ashide Pev, Friday Pev, and Gabriel Aka, on the defendants, and others said to be at large. Mr. Clement Pev testified for the prosecution as PW1 and attempted to fix the defendants at the scene of the crime. However, defendants each pleaded alibi by stating that they were not at the scene of the crime, which implies that they were elsewhere, not at the scene of the crime. Can the defendants who say they were not at the scene of the crime by raising alibi be said to be at the scene of the crime and could have done any act or omission that caused the death of the deceased? The answer is in the negative. This is because from the evidence of each of the 4 witnesses fielded by the prosecution in proof of their case and a close perusal of particularly exhibits B, D, F, and H, I do not see how the defendant can be placed at the scene of the crime, or is there any confessional statement or circumstantial evidence for which this court could rely on to link the defendants with the killing of the deceased. In Ezio Go versus the state, alibi was defined thus, and I quote, "The defense of alibi connotes that the accused person was elsewhere at the time of the commission of the offense charge. In other words, the import of the defense of alibi and what it entails is that the accused person was elsewhere other than where the prosecution alleges he was at the time of the commission of the offense, making it impossible for him to have committed or participated in the commission of the offense with which he was charged. Once alibi has been properly raised by an accused person, it is the duty of the prosecution to investigate and disprove it. However, it is the duty of the accused person relying on the defense of alibi to give details of the alibi he sets up to enable the prosecution investigate it. The accused person's duty involves letting the police know at the earliest opportunity where and with whom he was at the material time." Unquote. Flowing from the above, and as rightly submitted by the Senate Counsel for the defendant, which I'm in agreement with, the prosecution does not have to investigate every alibi, however improbable. However, where the story of the defendant, if believed, is capable of providing a defense, there is a duty upon the prosecution to investigate the story, and failure on the part of the prosecution to do so, as in the case instant, may amount to an admission. In Hemio Ntam and another versus the state, Olayo versus the state supra, the Supreme Court held, and I quote, "There are occasions on which failure to check an alibi may cast doubt on the reliability of the case for the prosecution. But in a situation such as this, where the appellants were identified by 3 eyewitnesses, there was a straight issue of credibility, and we are not able to say that the judge's finding of facts were unreasonable or cannot be supported having regard to the evidence." Flowing from the above, and since the prosecution and their witnesses by their evidence are fixing the defendants at the scene of the crime, and the defendants set up alibi, the state issue of credibility of the evidence arises for consideration. More worrisome is the fact that PW1, who claimed to be an eyewitness of the heinous crime which took place on the 7th of September 2019, revealed the identity of the perpetrators or murderers of the Zaki Ubab family members as being the defendants 5 months after commission of the offenses, when he, PW1, went to make an additional statement to the police on the 11th day of February 2020. While giving evidence in court on the 14th day of July 2021 in this case, from the evidence on record and as reflected in Exhibit A, Mr. Clement Pep earlier visited the state CID Lafayette on the 12th day of November 2019, that is 2 months after the killing of the deceased, but did not specifically mention the names of the defendants as the people he saw committing the offenses, or point such accusing fingers at them to aid the police in a discreet investigation. It is right that visual identification is one of the best forms of identification in a criminal case. However, in the case instant, PW1 said in his evidence in chief that when he heard the sound of gunshots coming from Zaki Ubab's compound, he went there and saw the defendants, particularly Gabriel, you are flashing torchlight on the dead bodies. This evidence of PW1 was discredited in cross-examination, and he could not satisfactorily place the defendants at the scene of the crime. Furthermore, the claim of PW1 when cross-examined that he did not immediately make a statement to the police after the arrest of the defendant because police believed he was the nominal complainant or that he had been looking for the culprits cannot, in my considered view, hold water in the circumstance. The evidence adduced by the prosecution, witnesses,